on in your flesh, you're in trouble.
It's true.
You need to be in the spirit.
All right, I'm gonna throw up this counter thing. You'll see it. It counts down for a second.
Okay.
Ooh, all right. Oh yeah, that's right. It is time. It is time for some fun. This is the 15th birthday party pod for Homebrewed Christianity. And we are about to have ourselves some fun. If you have joined live on Facebook or YouTube, Twitter, and such, feel free to holler at any point in the comments. Anything that's not thoroughly inappropriate, you're welcome to put there and talk to each other. You can send in questions or topic discussions, memories, references. Doesn't matter what it is. I will mark them so at different points in the time we can go to them. But who knows what's going to happen, because today we have not one but two long-time Homebrewed Christianity mic rockers. We got, originally was Tony, you were senior deacon. Episode 4 was his first visit.
Episode 4, yeah.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, you sent it to me, and I couldn't
listened?
listen to more than 5 minutes, and I was like, I can't, dude, I can't listen. Trip, you sounded awesome. I sounded like a freaking idiot.
Well, I mean, I agree. I sounded awesome, but I have the kind of self-affirmation that sometimes leads me not to distinguish excellence from just energy. Anyway, but you were started as senior deacon because you claimed on your first visit, if you had made it through the podcast, look, I was the one that told you should actually try to do this on the internet. So if every Homebrewed listener is a deacon, I should be a senior deacon. And I was like, all right. Then, after a while, Bo suggested you should get an upgrade because you had been on. You're the first person to get to 10 times on the podcast. And so we let you pick your title. We asked, and you wanted to be the grouchy elder of Homebrewed Christianity.
Oh, right. That was a phase. That was a phase.
It was a phase, Bo.
A long-lasting phase.
I know. So we have the grouchy elder. We have to give you a new title after tonight. You've really been ruining your reputation of late, being all nice on the podcast. Oh, you wouldn't believe this. I talked to him the last few times. He was so nice that Brian McLaren texted him and is like, I just love when you talk with Tripp, you're being so pastoral, helping him think through.
What? No.
Yeah. Sorry, Bo. Buddy, I've lost my edge.
Wait, did you get a vaccine or something? What happened?
I must have long haul COVID giving me brain fog or something.
Oh gosh. Well, okay.
And we also have tonight the return of the Bo Daddy.
Woo! Bo Daddy
in
the house.
Hey, Tripp Fuller and Tony Jones. It is so good to see you both.
Oh, this is gonna be fun. So, one of the perks of doing the live stream is people can all hop in. It's very cool getting to see all the messages and stuff.
Yeah.
Now, because it's a birthday, a birthday party, we have to have our celebratory beverages. And because I knew we were going to have some fun, I didn't pregame like I normally pregame, not like that episode from PYM that Bo didn't know how he was going to edit correctly.
Yeah, that got a little unruly.
Racy.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
So I want to give a shout out to Andy from Iowa who sent this, which is from Kentucky. So what did you say this is called, Tony? This bourbon?
Isn't that Calumet?
Calumet. There you go.
Oh.
Andy sent this for the birthday party, and then when it got here, I said, "Well, obviously, we should get Tony and Bo something exciting."
Trip, are we allowed to make? I'm enjoying this comment thing on the side. This is a really good new feature. But are we allowed to make fun if something funny is said, or
you can? Be selective. And also, if you notice something thoroughly inappropriate, I'll just block them.
Well, I just have to say, Tony, who seems like a really good person with his first comment, says Trip and Tony J episodes of the pod are my second favorite after Diana Butler Bass and Brian McLaren, which would make it his third favorite.
Well, look, he was pre-gaming the party,
Okay. So this is not homebrewed mathianity.
No. Theologians don't care about math.
All right, just checking.
I'm drinking, thanks to Trip, I'm drinking a bottle of New Riff single barrel, 108.3 proof bourbon. New Riff only comes to Minnesota once a year, probably. They're allocated bottles, and they just arrived. I wasn't going to get a bottle because they're pricey. But then Trip sent me a birthday gift, and I bought this New Riff. So Trip, later this month, it's going to be my 55th birthday on March 31st. And did you say that episode number 4, we recorded it on my 40th birthday?
Yeah.
Was that in your garage? No, we were on the phone. We were on the phone.
This was on the phone before they used the internet to record podcasts.
Right, right, okay. Like we did freeconferencecall.com or something.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I remember
on my
when
40th birthday.
I started using money from my church fund to get the advanced version of freeconferencecall.com so I could have interviews over 45 minutes, which I'm sure for any, because, in the last 5 years, people started using the internet more and the podcast has grown. So last year we had 5 million downloads, and that was the first year we've had 5 in a year. The email, people that are on the email list and stuff has kept growing. There's over 70,000 now on it. So a lot of people, the comments I've got about this are, okay, well, we've heard random stories come up when you and Tony are talking about stuff that happened with Bo, but we can't find those episodes unless we literally go on the webpage and crawl back, because iTunes only, lets me have 150 up there.
Yeah.
And then we got a stack of comments and questions from long-timers who are excited. So just know this, both of you, if a quality story aside enables people that may not know the whole 15-year history to enjoy it more, interject and tell the story. And maybe it will get them to go back and find episodes and discover whether or not our memory of them is as accurate as the versions. Now, I don't know if this is true for you, but it's definitely true of me. It only takes using it in a sermon twice for the polished version that makes a point to become historical.
Well, I want to make a couple comments, and Bo, I'd be interested in your. Okay, first of all, there are many. I think, Trip, did you say there are 46 hours of me on the Homebrewed podcast
of us talking
as a guest?
Yeah,
that's insane.
What counts the TNT episodes as well?
Many of those I vaguely recall, if I recall them at all. And
Well,
I will tell you,
you had pretty bad jet lag a couple times, I remember.
Oh, yeah. See, you remember them better than I. And then the other thing I would say is, a lot of times when I felt like another guest like Peter Rollins was catching up to my my count of how many times as a guest, I would call in on the speak pipe and leave messages just so my voice would be on the podcast.
Oh,
and I would get credit for being on another episode.
Wow.
Yeah. Do you remember
Devious.
You know what I heard when re-listening to the first appearance of both of you on the podcast this week? Before the speak pipe, we had a Google Voice number, and I created a ditty for it that went like this: 678-590 brew, 678-590 brew, 678-590 BREW, and I would sing that just so Nick and Josh from the Very Dead Emergent podcast, who were very upset that I actually read the books when I interviewed emergent people and understood them.
Shots fired.
I know. Yeah. They can call me if they want. No, look, Nick and Josh, rest in peace. It's all good. It's all good. I'm sure they're post-religious now and still working at an Apple store.
Hey, before we get too long, I just wanted to say I didn't get a chance to share that when we toast a little later, I got St. Bernardus triple for, so I'm saving that for the toast.
Oh, yes.
Very nice.
Ooh, so Khaled is in, Khaled and Christina Keith Perry are both in the comments. And here is a memory prompt. We'll see what comes up with this one. Okay. Theology after Google.
Classic.
It was the first time and only time I was in the Los Angeles Times.
Is that right?
Yeah. It was this event at Claremont that Phil Clayton and Phil Clayton and I organized for Claremont. Tony was a part. Doug was there.
That's where I first met Ryan Parker, who's become one of my dearest friends. Yeah.
Is that right?
He was Ryan. I think you put in charge of shooting short films, interviews with theologians, asking liberal theologians to actually say something progressive and constructive about God. And
I loved those.
Remember, Bo, they squirmed. They caveated until they were out of caveats, man. They couldn't say it. They couldn't do it.
Tony, I don't know if that's where you came up with the phrase, but I heard you say so many times about theological for liberal progressive theologians, theological throat clearing, like before they could say anything. And I don't know if that's where you came up with the phrase, but I always think of those videos when you said that phrase.
It's true. Remember that Trip? I mean, even Trip, who's in that camp, you were frustrated with those theologians.
I remember it, and I think all my comments about it I would edit out after the stream's over, except for okay, I'm not going to use this person's name because they are full tenured faculty at a divinity school at one of the Ivy League schools at this point. But they were in the videoing session with Tony and Joseph Bracken, who's a Jesuit process theologian who actually answered the questions, right? So
Catholics tend to do that.
Yeah. Right. There's nothing quite like having to say your sins are forgiven and this is my body 20 times a week that inspires you to be able to answer a question about God. So Bracken gives these beautiful answers and Tony leans over and is like, Ryan was saying people just dodge the questions and aren't saying anything. Then a young theologian it comes up, and the first question was, who is God? And these questions were voted on by thousands of people on Patheos. Tony did this thing, and we were all pushing it online, right? What are the most popular God questions? Who is God? And this individual goes, it looked like they just swallowed, like they had those like Harry Potter beans, and they thought it was Tutti Frutti, but it tasted like vomit. Who? Maybe what? And
hey, can I give you a theory on this thing?
Ooh,
I've been thinking a lot about this lately. So I'm in a very liberal part of the country. I'm in a very liberal church, and I myself am not liberal. I love liberals and I enjoy hanging out with them. But can I just tell you something? I have come to view this thing like Jesus telling his best friend, "Get thee behind me, Satan." And I think the reason that he had such an emotive response is because Peter was offering him the easy way out, and it touched a nerve. It was too close to the thing he wanted most. Peter was saying, you don't need to suffer. And Jesus is like, hey, get out of here with that. And I think the reason that it drew such a response is because it cut too close to the bone. It was too close to the very thing that he was being tempted by. And I'm going to go on a limb and say that after hanging out with liberal Christians for 5 years, I think that the question of who God is so sensitive and so tender because it speaks to their biggest insecurity.
Ooh, now you're both practical theologians.
Yes.
Tony, do you think theologians are insecure trying to talk about God?
I mean, I think progressive theologians are overly insecure, and conservative theologians are overly confident. Yeah.
Oh. Hey, I want to shout out a hilarious comment in the side. It says, some people lose Oh Contreire for not being creative. Tony's going to lose it for being an a-hole by Christianity Today. Joshua Patterson.
Oh man, I missed that one. That's quality. Now we're gonna get to Oh Contreire.
Yeah.
Hey, can I want to ask because Trip, you already said, I think listeners have even your more recent listeners have heard me on the podcast regularly, a couple times a year. And I appreciate you having me on. But for the listeners who've joined in the last few years, I want to hear how you two guys met and about your partnership of when Bo was on the podcast and kind of what journey that took you both on. And then where, Bo, what have you done since you've, moved into the pastorate?
Oh, that's so nice. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Trip, can I take the first run at it?
Oh yeah, yours is probably going to be more accurate than my version.
Okay. So here's how I remember it. So in 2008, I moved from upstate New York, where I had been a pastor for 11 years, to go to seminary in Portland, Oregon. And I started a podcast called An Everyday Theology. And it was nice. It got about up to like 1,200 listeners. And I was really proud of it. And I loved it. In 2010, I was emailing you actually about practical theology programs. And I got into Claremont. Tony, that's Tony. And then I started emailing Trip because I had found, I think I had listened to, remember the Thank God for Evolution guy?
Yeah, Michael Dowd.
Thanks. I'd listened to Michael Dowd interview on Homebrewed, and I started emailing Trip. And when I found out I was going down to Claremont from Olympia, Washington, Trip said, hey, why don't you leave behind An Everyday Theology and bring those people over to Homebrew, and we'll join with some superpowers. So in 2010, I moved to Los Angeles. Trip and I met at that amazing, what was that ale house in Claremont that had the duck?
The Back Abbey. The Back Abbey. With like 40 different European, probably 3/4 of it Belgian Abbey ales on draft, which for two guys of the larger variety who you don't want to have to pee twice before you're tipsy. So you got to go for those higher gravity beverages.
So Trip and I had lunch and we just hit it off right away. And so that was 2010. And I joined Homebrewed Christianity, and I was editing some audio behind the scenes, and I started writing some blogs. And then, as things progressed, and I became like a partner. And so but my favorite day of our whole journey together was I had said to Tripp, I had just gotten a job at a Methodist church on the west side, and he lived down in Palos Verdes. And I said, hey, man, you're like really good at interviewing people, blah, blah, blah. But like, I think people want to hear what you have to say. And so we came up with this thing where you had just done like a 5-part interview on maybe atonement theology or something. And so, but then
it was like 5 different interviews on Christology.
Yeah, Christology, including Joseph Bracken and, Elizabeth Johnson. And so then you and I met in my office in Westwood, and I actually interviewed you, and we decided to put that. It became so popular that it became a second channel called the Theology Nerd Throwdown. And that was my favorite moment in everything we did, hosting conferences and, traveling and all we did. But my favorite thing was that second stream of the Theology Nerd Throwdown.
There it is.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm talking about. This is the theme song for Theology Nerd Throwdown. And, here's my memory about this.
Man, I have not heard that in like 5 or 6 years.
I definitely found it earlier today, and I had to repurchase the license.
I can't even handle it.
But I repurchased it, a lifetime license, because since you're turning 50 and you said, could we do another TNT for your birthday? I was like, well, I'm going to buy it at least for that. And then when everyone is like, we love you and Bo Talking, you should do it more often. This is just me. This is called dropping the lure, Bo. Do you know what dropping the lure in front of 460 people that are on the live stream is? That's what this is.
Is it? Yeah. All right. Well,
because I have the audio. You feel it. Oh.
Tell you guys, explain the Theology Nerd Throwdown was a way to do something like, have me on more regularly than the main feed, which was interviewing people who had new books out all the time. Right?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So here's, I remember going to the Back Abbey, right? I want to give a big shout out to Austin Roberts, who dropped in while you were telling the story.
No way.
Yeah, he just said, I remember those days with Bo and Tripp at the Back Abbey after theology classes at CST. So fun. Austin showed up at Claremont around the time you did, doing his master's. Yeah. He was in the first theology class I taught at Claremont with Phil Clayton. And then he ended up being a Catherine Keller PhD student. So I basically take credit for everything good Austin's ever done.
Oh, I don't know about that.
I told Catherine, she was like, he's really one of the best students I've ever had. And I was like, well, you know what his first graduate school theology class was. Anyway, but when because at first I was like, oh, let's get involved. But you started editing, and you were way better at editing than other people because you actually understood theology.
Oh yeah, that's
and
right.
You also learned. You quickly told me which ones I edited and not. Here's how Bo said this kindly, because he's trying to be nice when we're at this interview. Tony, he says, "Hey, sometimes when you're doing interviews, because you don't want to have to edit, you just talk until you get around to the question you were about to think about. And it kind of sounds like you asked 3 questions. Have you ever thought about just editing your questions so whatever they answer is the only thing on the podcast?"
It's so funny, because I had been a listener.
Yeah.
I had picked up on a pattern. So when I actually got hold of the audio, and I said, it doesn't need to be this complicated.
You're like, you asked 3 questions to a theologian, and they answer one of them, and then you've moved on. Like, just I'm going to edit just the part you actually answered. And I was like, I feel heard.
Oh my God.
And when you started doing the blogs, were great because you and I told you this, was it probably 4 or 5 months ago when we were on the phone, when we started TNT. So it was like a second show, because you had like before I had a PhD, I was very insecure about having my own theological voice on a show where it's like super legit scholars. And then there's like trips. So if there was an episode where it's like, I have an MDiv and I just finished 2 years of my PhD classwork, and I'm going to put myself right between Catherine Keller, Elizabeth Johnson, John Cobb, and Jack Caputo. I fit there, right? I was just uncomfortable with it. But Bo's like, thousands of people listen to you talk. They probably want to know what you think. You're entertaining at the bar. Also, you probably need direction, or you're not going to say anything that other people follow. Which is very similar to Tony's early blogging advice. I blog through Ponnenberg Systematic and Graduates in doing my MDiv, and Tony's like, heads up, blog posts that thrive do not have 4,000 words and 5 paragraphs. Great content, anyway. So
tighten it up, Trip. Tighten it up.
So Bo does this. Bo's like, oh, well, let's just get, after it works, he's like, let's just get topics going, right? And he would keep up with what people did on the internet, and then would do these blog posts just baiting people to give us ammo. And so we get on TNT because I talked Phil Clayton into giving us a room no one was using at Claremont School of Theology, where we had all of our shit logged up. So for like 2 years, we would live stream once a week and would have a couple hundred people that would get on live. And in whatever that room was up at the top of Butler, it was super sketch. I don't know if anyone had been in there forever, or if the rest of the campus knew we were even in there. But we would do those live streams. So this like weird Gundle onto, what was it? There was some weird app. This was like before Blab. It was before Blab. It was like, I can't remember what it was, but you could just stream audio. So we would sit in there and do TNT episodes, and you would have blogged basically theological, like catnip, and you would have collected responses, and then we'd start talking about it. And if I said something dumb or crazy, you would say, oh, well, what does that mean? Where does this come from? And then like where I would get going, and then I'd be like, yeah, so what do you do with that? And kind of like make you tell me something reasonable or rational or reflective about practice about it, while we were both just fun, like friends that are nerding out, possibly day drinking on a Methodist school campus and having a great time. So like the whole TNT experience was like the online place where our friendship made me more comfortable having a public voice. And that's when I decided that you were the Magic Johnson of podcasting.
Wow.
Right? Like that you were the point forward, because I've done a lot of podcasts with people, and you're like my favorite one to have a conversation with that is like just back and forth, because you can intuit where the ball's going, how the play is going, and you like do conversation and practicality while actually understanding what's going on, and think about the listener at the same time. I usually think about the listener right after I get done, because I'm enjoying the flow state of just thinking out loud. And you're like Magic Johnson, where you're like, if I just respond to you, I'm told by everyone that loves me, I've never heard you so clear. Yeah. And that's why, and I've had a lot of people try, to perform the Bo Daddy. You are the Magic Johnson of theological podcasting. And that was
that was the magic. That was the magic of when you guys were doing it together, because Bo, you busted his chops when necessary. You often ask clarifying questions, and you brought long discourses to an end when they needed to be.
Wow.
So it was just fun. It was fun. And you've got, and the voice, dude, the voice. I mean, my God. I mean, you've got the like, two packs a day voice. It's incredible.
Wow. This is honestly
standards.
The most affirmation I have gotten since before COVID. This is like coming out of the cave, and this is so nice to hear. Thank you both for your kind words. I want to tell two other fun stories. Tony, you probably don't even remember this. 2009, I emailed you for the first time, and I asked about practical theology programs. And you actually said, like, you gave me great advice, and you actually said, but make sure that they encourage you to talk about God. I don't know if you remember that, but
no, I don't.
I still have that email from 2009. I thought it was so fascinating. And at the time it seemed like, okay, I'm sure that means something. But, you know, all these years later, that's really actually profound thing to say to a young person looking into scholarship. So I appreciate that a lot. And there were several other times, by the way, where you would give, I don't even know if you remember this stuff, but you would give me advice or correction because I was so active, right, on the blog. Sometimes I was firing out things before they had been sort of vetted. Mm-hmm. There were a couple times where I really probably could have gotten myself into trouble where you said like, hey, you should pull that down, bro. And, lovingly saying like, hey, so what I've learned, by the way, since then is I didn't know about the Enneagram back then. So since then, I've figured out that I believe, I don't know how into the Enneagram you are, but if you're an 8, and I'm not trying to identify you, but I think you're an 8. So you're a contrarian.
He's married to the Enneagram. So
yeah, I'm only 8.
So I am a 7, which means I'm a cheerleader with an 8 wing, which means I will be your biggest cheerleader unless something doesn't go well, and then I'm a nightmare because I have an unpracticed 8. And so my unpracticed 8 is once in a while I needed like an older sibling to say, hey, why don't you bring that? By the way, I also want to do a shout out to Pamela Chaddock, who I saw come up in the thing. She also was a big sister to me back then, and I really appreciated her perspective. So I want to give a shout out to her. But
she also called you Magic Sanders. So I just want you to know that is a Magic Johnson, but Magic Sanders.
That's a huge.
Yeah, come on.
So Trip, I just want to say to you,
on the night that Pau Gasol is being, his jersey's being retired.
Oh, nice.
That's actually, I know this will end at 2 hours just so I could watch his jersey get. He too was a Redondo Beach resident, and Elgin and I met him when Elgin was like 9 months old at the Mexican restaurant next to our house. I love Pau Gasol, but I also cry at Laker games, so it's okay.
I just want to say that every engine needs a transmission, and that's really how I viewed us being a 2-man band for those magical 5 years. Was there's only one Trip Fuller, right? I think everyone would agree with that, right? Jack Caputo called you a singularity the first time he met you. I'll always remember that in San Diego. But every engine needs a transmission. You gotta somehow, all of that juice and octane and caffeine and whatever else is in there, but it has to translate down and put power into the ground. So it was an honor, and I just loved doing that, because I always felt, I'm a drummer and that's my background. And I always felt like, if you were in a band and your lead singer happened to be one of those voices that was capturing lightning in a bottle, like you were going somewhere, you were going to do something. And so you were the engine. And I just tried to make sure that all that energy somehow translated and pushed power into the ground to move the theological conversation forward. So this has been wonderful to hear. The things that are coming up on the side are making me blush. Like I really am. So anyway, Tony, thank you for letting us take a tour.
No, I think that's great. I mean, a couple things. Yeah, I'm an 8 and my wife's a 7. So we have, I have a lot of experience in that little area of the Enneagram. But I'll also say that for people, newer listeners and probably like younger, maybe there's people who are, 10, 15 years younger than we are, who maybe now are just in seminary or getting going to ministry. Okay. I think it's hard to, you can't overstate the importance of blogs 15 years ago.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
And how much, you're Homebrewed, like there's no, you're not actively blogging anymore, but at the time, as big as the podcast was, the website traffic was so huge from the blogging. And honestly, when I listened to that, when I listened to that episode number 4, I could hear I was on Homebrewed as a blogger, and I was trying to be overly provocative and push everybody's buttons and piss people off, and trying to drive more traffic to my blog, and stuff like that. So it's interesting that this podcast has lasted 15 years when it started in that milieu of blogging, and blogging died, and the whole trip was you were just early on that, and you kept with it as the medium evolved, and as another big medium that at the time we thought was the shit ended up, it ran its course. So that's just an interesting, neither here nor there maybe, but part of it.
Hey, a couple things I just want to say. I got a text from a friend right as the show was starting to say I look terrible, and I just want to say in my defense, I'm in the middle of a bathroom renovation. I kid you not. And I biked to and from work today. So I admit that I am not, I look a little worse for the weather. So I just want to acknowledge that in case anybody says, man, this guy isn't, you worry about him.
You're okay, Bo. Okay. Right. So I solicited on Instagram questions for us to discuss. So we're going to do a few of these, and then we're going to play Oh Contreire Monfrere, because I think since it is Homebrewed's birthday, Tony might lapse back into being an asshole.
It's possible
for 20 minutes.
I need a little more bourbon before I become an asshole. I want to shout out to Dean in the comments, who I met at Black Stump in 2008. I'll just also say that
Gen X is a virus.
For me, 2008 is also such a mixed bag. Looking back to the 15 years ago when you launched this. Because in some ways it was like the absolute peak of my career. I got the biggest book deal of my life. I went on this 32-city book tour. That the second time I was on Homebrewed, I was with Doug, and we did the Church Basement Roadshow. We did the whole show.
I'm pretty sure y'all were in character. You weren't on.
We were in character for the whole episode of that show. And then, but it was also 2008 was the year, like, personally, my life fell apart, and a lot of bad things happened. So later I'm going to raise a glass to Trip for that. But it's just, that's all part of the everything that brings back. And I'm sure I'm not alone. I'm sure a lot of people out there who were listening to, I'll just say this, as we go into Oh Contreire and have a lot of fun tonight, but also the three of us and a lot of people are listening are very different than we were 15 years ago. And the nice thing about HBC is it's been in some way a community and a voice in our head through all these transitions. People have deconstructed, people have gone into ministry, people have left ministry, people have had loved ones die, they've watched their kids grow up. I mean, it's hard for me to even think, like, I got a 22, a 21, and an 18-year-old, and think 15 years ago, I had like 3 little kids. Oh
my gosh, they were so small.
The point being, 15 years, man. I mean, that's like a generation, it's pretty impressive. And it's been an important part for me, an important voice in my life. And obviously, Trips, you've been such a good friend to me. I'll toast you later when we get to the toast, but wanted to say that, especially when I see somebody like Dean, a guy I met 15 years ago in Australia, when people would invite me to come speak in Australia. Those were the days.
Hey, this thing of the chats on the side is incredible. What a great innovation.
Don't you think that would be really cool if, I don't know, we did it every month and we invited random friends each time back on, and it went on the TNT feed that's been dead for a while, that just has about 7,000 or 8,000 people just sitting there waiting for a new episode. I mean, this is just called the lure, Bo. It's just called the lure. I'm just hypothetically throwing it out there.
I bet you got a spare microphone you can box up and send out to Bo.
No, if he had said that he got rid of the microphone, I apologize. I got the microphone. I've gotten you had a Zoom recorder and some other things. I feel like they're like I'm more than happy to mail tech to random people to do things for the podcast. If it is a deep friend who I was just polishing up some of his Warhammer paintings for a battle with my son this weekend, then there's no chance I'm not going to send him. Plus, people may be confused. Are you saying right now, why is the Bo Daddy doesn't have the low end on his voice like you, Trip? It is simply technology, because he has the perfect internet voice. And yes, Steve Wilson, do I actually fish? What is this?
Oh yeah. Trip has sent me pictures of fish.
Yes, I love fishing. You want to know what? A weekend afternoon during fishing season, and I'm back in North Carolina, so we are about 6 or 7 weeks from when the bass start bedding. If a weekend that doesn't involve fishing for largemouth bass, I have to have I'm just self-editing. Well, a married person has to have all sorts of certain encounters repeatedly to rearrange their schedule, not to choose to go bass fishing. I love bass. Bass fishing is as awesome as smoking a cigar with your favorite craft beer, because both of them invite you to do two things. One, sit there. You can't play with your phone. You can't listen to anything. None of that. When you have a cigar or your fishing pole, then you're attending to whatever the present is. Second, there is almost no better place to have the conversation you're going to wish you had when you're dying with whoever it is you're smoking a cigar or fishing with. So I love fishing. And since I only have kids that aren't old enough to smoke cigars yet, then I am looking forward, after 3 years and a spiritual and physical exile in Scotland, of being tormented and locked down in a cold, dark place that the sun never came up except for 3 months, bass season. Yes, that's right. And I will be making sure all 3 of my children can this is the first time I'm going to get Elgin to use artificial lures. Now, that is a conversation, if he successfully does it, for the Reverend Hunter podcast, which is Tony's podcast. Look at that plug. Now we're going to transition to
hold questions. On, Strip. I'm sorry. I didn't hear anything you just said. What is this self-editing thing you said earlier?
Oh, I was going to discuss how fishing is almost as fun as having sex at least twice on a weekend. And if you're trying to time edit on your weekend.
No. I'm sorry. When did self-editing start? I think I missed
it. When I started doing more of them on the internet, and realized in the comments that when they freaked out.
Oh, now flying solo isn't for everyone.
Yeah. Well, you want to know what? You want to know the only 2 topics I've learned to self-edit about, because you 2 said, Trip, you can get 1 10-minute rant about being a Christian socialist a month, but if you do more than that, it's a bit too much on a theology podcast. And Chad Crawford, the OG partner at Homebrewed, said, Trip, you can't talk about your love of extraterrestrials every episode. Like, you just have to and if you bring it up, could you not just give multiple stories about extraterrestrials and all your friends, and everyone, and then you sound like David Ray Griffin talking about 9/11.
Oh,
and so
listen, I think about him. He passed.
No, I was at the funeral 2 weeks ago.
Listen, I think about that man all the time.
Famous process theologian, by the way, for those that don't know.
And he lost all credibility, rightly or wrongly, because he became a public voice of a conspiracy theory. I think about him every time I think about buying into a conspiracy theory. I think of David Ray Griffin.
Well, I just want you to know, right before we actually go into the questions, people sent knowing the 3 of us were on, that actually, I'm going to self-edit again, but I'll put it this way.
This is the weirdest development ever.
Look,
see, we've all changed. We've all changed in 15 years, Paul.
Look, I'll just say this. I think there are so many topics that when I was assigned different philosophy classes at the University of Edinburgh, that David Ray Griffin's articles were the best one I could find. So I'll just say that. And also Josh Patterson, I got the Full Tilt Brewing your hat on. He's a brewer at Full Tilt Brewing. And I'm currently drinking his beer. But he wants the sex or fishing podcast episode. All right. So if y'all give me a thumbs up or thumbs down if you want to talk about these questions, because I have more than we'll get to. So you have to both give a thumbs up. Okay, wait.
Tony and I?
Yeah, I'll give a thumbs up if we're going to discuss it.
Okay.
I don't want to ask us to talk short. I would more like provocations for a fun conversation. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But the first one everyone has to have. You have to answer this one, Bo, because there are 3 different versions of this. This is my favorite. What are a couple of ideas Bo's gotten pumped, frustrated, or wild about in the last few years since we got to hang out with him? Could he say random provocative statements and see what you and Tony say in response before he tells you how to be practical and reasonable about
it? Come on. Wait, that's too on the nose.
No. Marty, who is a homebrewed elder, Marty donates every month. And yeah, look, he's sitting here saying he wants to know, look, and you can use this because you've been working on all your doctoral stuff and you went into a new church and then went through COVID. There's been lots of things on top of it, along with Bo's become quite the engineer of bikes in the last few years. I don't know if that is a theological topic, but that's also happened.
So does this person want me to say something?
Yeah, you pick what are a couple topics and ideas, especially assuming you're lured into at least your 50th birthday TNT episode that we're going to discuss.
All right. Identity politics is not the gospel. The Democratic Party is not the kingdom of God, and it will never deliver us to the beloved community that we long for.
Well, that was on the tip of the tongue.
You could have. Were you not following Trip Fuller on Twitter during COVID?
Oh my God!
I'm not. I left Twitter when I left Homebrewed.
I know.
God, dude. Yeah, it's smart because I almost muted Trip, who was like the ultimate Bernie bro. All he could tweet about was socialism. I'm just like, dude. Stop. So I'm going to piggyback on Bo.
No, you piggyback on Bo. Y'all's mutual harassment of me is wonderful.
And I'll talk about a theological thing too, but this is like more ecclesiological. But along with Bo, I've been disheartened to see how the vast majority of the people who were with me trying to reform the church for 10 or 15 years in the emergent movement have basically become politics has basically become their number one activity in life. Like politics is the vehicle they think will change society. And I'm so fucking cynical about, I'm pretty cynical about the church, as you two fellas know. I am 100 times more cynical about politics. So I've been just surprised and frustrated that people who worked so hard to change the church and failed. It's like we ran our heads into a brick wall for 10 years trying to change an institution in America as monolithic as the church. And now they're trying to change politics. I'm like, you're never going to change politics. Go back to changing the church, or like pick something else. I just don't think, I don't think, anyways. And I vote, I'm not a hermit. I haven't like withdrawn from society, but I'm also not going to use all of my mental and emotional energy to change a system that I think is probably irredeemable. And I'm sure as shit not going to just go on Twitter and posture constantly, virtue signal with my tweets, which I am disheartened to see friends of mine do a lot.
Well, Tony would be real depressed if he had read my Twitter draft folder.
I bet.
Now, one of the things about this and I think I've grown more and more aware of this over time, but when I moved back to the US after 3 years in Scotland, I realized that if you were to take a dial of agency and said, what are the relationships of like a turning, we'll go to Spinal Tap, 1 to 11. What are the places my agency has the most transformative impact? Right?
Good
like
question.
the places that you cross 5 are very small. Obviously, the one that gets the highest, and depending on your anthropology, maybe a 7, is yourself, right? Like that. Most best guessed, if you ask a psychologist and look at the psychological sciences, even the notion of freedom's rather limited and such. But if you want to know where you have the power to make a change, you have yourself. And then the places that you have immediate, where your own agency connects to relations like friends, family, neighbors, and such. The way you exercise agency in institutions, communities, consumption, and things. And like you mentioned, voting and things and all that kind of stuff, like, which is whatever voting is, it is not as high as billionaires with the money to purchase advertising. So like once you recognize that, I feel like there's an invitation to have the frustrations, anxieties, and the things that ultimately determine your selfhood shift to the places you actually have agency. And I think that is, to me, one of the things that's problematic about the Bo, your line, like identity politics is not the gospel. It's not because either any of us have a space of non-inclusion in our vision of the gospel. No. It's just what that conversation does to the gospel is problematic. Is it short circuits how the good news ultimately problematizes where we actually have power. One of the lines John Cobb said that stuck out to me, praise be John JC.
We cross ourselves when we say a JC.
I don't know, but we could put up the QR code for the book I edited of his unreleased writings that just came out. I had
you
this.
You just happen to have that queued up.
No, it was. I'm sorry. It was saved. It was saved from his birthday party, his 98th birthday party. When you said that, I thought you'll both appreciate the fact that I have this saved here. But no, he draws a distinction between responsibility for something. That's where you have some of your own agency, and responsibility too. And the moment you think that now your responsibility is the agency of another, then you get burnout, you get anxiety, you get resentment, and all sorts of things. The most basic example is your children, right? Like the moment you think your 3-year-old losing their shit like a normal 3-year-old does in the grocery store, and you say no more suckers, and now you think you're responsible for them, not to them as their parent, then you act a fool as a parent.
Yeah.
And the same's true about our political structures, our economic structures, and things. I feel like I've spent most of the time on the podcast letting everyone know what I think about our macroeconomic structures, but like to lose your biscuits every day that you learn that our collective system is oppressed by certain things, then actually like sucks the energy out you to be more attentive and present in each moment to the places you're responsible for things yourself and responsible to things, the people you're connected to in a moment. Anyway, that is
so I just want to say, like, identity politics is the best thing I've been introduced to in the last 15 years. I think everyone should bring their full self to each moment and to the voting booth. And so in that sense, it is literally the best thing I've been introduced to probably in the last 15 years. And yet, for that to become a totalizing, all-encompassing lens through which everything is viewed through census categories is to take away from, I mean, everything from, right, that we're working towards. So I just want to say that I'm a big fan, and at the same time, it is not the whole game. That's all I want to say.
All right.
Let me throw in another one then, Trip. I got one more
All
on
right.
that question, I think. And maybe this is a bit of a, well, I'll just say this. You know, Trip, you and I are going to be in Seattle in a couple weeks doing the first live mini conference for the You Have Permission podcast. And I know that one of the things I already know I'm going to have to, because I've been prepped, I'm going to have to talk about this stupid Gospel Coalition sex book that everyone's been up in arms about.
Wait, have you heard what's in it?
Yeah, I read the whole first freaking chapter, bro. Yes,
it's amazeballs.
So all I would say
by
is
amazeballs, we don't mean like full endorsement of the penetration of God and via
into
mails
the church, and right.
There's always going to be somebody who says the quiet thing out loud.
This is the thing, you guys. This is, I guess, what surprises me. And it shouldn't surprise me, but it does. It surprises me that people still talk like that. And in the big sense of like this big kerfluffle and people freak out and, you know, it's Driscoll 2.0, etc. But honestly, I have a friend who's in her early 40s and had a stroke a couple weeks ago, and her husband on her caring bridge is writing like every day, this God had a reason for this. There's a purpose. That this is still like this theology that I think I discarded in college, probably if not in high school. Yeah. So even when I'm just, you know, like in the hot tub at the gym talking to some old guy, and he's just like, well, the Lord told me to blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, people still talk like that? That just, to me, that's surprising, because I guess and I'm guessing the vast majority of people who listen to Homebrewed are on some kind of a spiritual and theological journey. They're not the same people they were 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I'm not the same person I was 15 years ago. And it's surprising to me, I guess, how often I run into people who haven't rethought, recalibrated, challenged, deconstructed their theology, and they're still have a very old sexual ethic, or they have a very old understanding of the agency of God, like breaking into the space-time continuum and then sucking back out, you know, like doing fancy little miracles and then bailing, and only doing those miracles if certain people pray hard enough, you know, things like this. That's I guess, to me, the thing that is surprising looking back 15 years, and just even the conversations we've had on this podcast, on this platform for the last 15 years. And I know how much I've changed, and I'm sure almost all the listeners have been on a similar kind of journey, you know, not the same journey as me, but at least on a freaking journey.
Yeah. Hey, I had a really good friend who used to say that your generosity needs to include every former version of yourself. And good. That whatever you believe now, you need to account for people who still hold to every position you have formerly held, and that's a grace.
You want to know what makes me laugh thinking of you mentioning that? Because that was in my talk at Big Tent Christianity in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Is a few years later when Tony and Pete and I were doing a blab, a dead social media platform, where it was like, it's basically this, but it's its own app. One of the questioners said, what was the most embarrassing thing that happened at a live speaking event? And when I heard this back, I said to myself, I clearly have learned to self-edit, because I couldn't imagine I put this on the internet. Tony told a story in this about that you were at this, what was it that happened? That you were at this youth camp thing, and that the preacher, what you told two. Oh, the funniest one was where Dave Crowder band was playing right after you spoke, and you were doing the
Church Basement Roadshow on the big stage. They gave me the big stage one time at the National Youth Workers Convention.
Whoa.
And it was the year they added a third city last minute, and they were just filling the stage. And so they gave me, and that's how they would do it. You know, they would, like, a young youth pastor in Grand Rapids, Rob Bell, they gave him the stage one time and he killed. And then it was like, anytime you want to come back, you've got the main stage in every city, you know? So they gave me the main stage one time, and I'm like, well, I've seen Rob Bell walk up there with a goat over his shoulders, you know. I've seen Mark Yak, and I've seen Shane Claiborne breathe fire and, like, recite the Sermon on the Mount and drop the mic and walk off the stage. I'm like, this is the place to just, like, go balls out. So we're like, we did a reprise of the Church Basement Roadshow on the main stage in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And it completely crashed and burned.
Oh no.
It bombed. It was completely terrible. Yeah, it was embarrassing. And as I was finishing my talk, dressed up as a 1908 barnstorming preacher, the people, as I was finishing, the people were rushing around because there was like a stage out in the middle, our stage in the round that I was speaking on. And then the main stage was behind me, and people were rushing around me because as soon as I ended my talk, the curtains flew open, and the Dave Crowder band and smoke machines and, like, strobe lights. I was just like, I could not get off that stage fast enough. It was terrible.
Wow.
And then the other story I probably told, Trip, was it about speaking in Salem, Massachusetts with Jay Baker when the porno came on the screen during the church conference?
Yes.
Yeah, that was insane. I've never seen anything like that before. It was crazy.
Wow.
Because somebody borrowed somebody's computer and they were trying to show a video.
No.
Yeah. And it's somebody, it was not good.
Well, I'll just contribute my low light real quick. Mine was actually on a blog. One morning, I worked in West LA and I lived in Claremont. So sometimes it was up to a 4-hour commute each way.
Yeah, all 18 miles of it.
That was a tough season of life. But when I would go to work early, and then sometimes, like, if I heard something on the news, you know, I blog about it. And you talked about the blogs and how they were, like, you know, pretty important back then. I mean, people really engaged them, right? And one day, a famous pastor, his son had committed suicide. And my mom was dying at the time. And I had, at the time, a brother-in-law who had this bizarre theology. And this brother-in-law was just, like, in my ear, just driving me crazy. And so when the famous pastor at the funeral of his son who had taken his own life said something that my brother-in-law had said, I lost it. And I blogged in reaction when you shouldn't blog. I was mad. I was mad that my mom was dying. I was mad that my brother-in-law was in my ear with his charismatic, rambling, bizarre, prophetic stuff. And I was mad. And I shouldn't have blogged. And I put it up. And I got a call from both of you that morning to say, hey, friend, you got to take this down. Like it's too much, I think about that moment because there were other moments. Like, for instance, I remember the moment that Pope Francis was elected, and I got to work 2 hours early and I had nothing to do. And so I typed up a little blog about my hopes for him, and I ended up on Australian public radio later that day. On their, like, whatever their BBC is, I was on Australian radio.
I've been on that. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that's a highlight and a low light. And I just, it was such a journey, and it was such a live moment, like in real time, right? Like IRL, that we were doing theology together.
And you know what, Bo?
Yeah.
I think one thing about that, and maybe the reason that podcasting superseded blogging, is because if you would have done that in a podcast, two things. You could have processed probably three things. A, you could have processed it. B, you would have been in conversation with Tripp. And C, people could have heard your voice and heard your brokenness. And in the blog, and I have so many blog posts that I regret. Some I've, tried to scrub from the internet because they were so stupid. And it was a shortcoming of blogs, is we tried to have hot takes, and some of us weren't so good, or we tried to develop our voice. But then you think of somebody like Rachel Held Evans, who she made her name. She made her career blogging because she was able to write in a way that people heard her voice.
Yeah.
And I think, like for you, Tripp, in podcasting, that's where your voice has shown. Yeah.
Okay. So two things, and then I'm going to tell a story. Then Bo's going to take over, and we're going to play Oh Contreire, Mon Frere, because I'm about to finish this beer, and I think I'm like turning the corner into being and dominating. Like, I'm going to pretend to be 30. Tony's going to pretend to be 40, and we're going to be combative with opinions. But Rachel Held Evans, so two things. One, Rachel Held Evans and I recorded 5 episodes of a podcast that never existed called RATT, R-A-T-T, Rachel and Tripp Talking.
I know.
She really liked it, and I was like, nah, I don't think it's going to work. And then 6 months later, she's world famous. I want you to know that.
Swing and a miss, Tripp.
Yeah, if you talk about failures, like I posted videos on YouTube at the anniversary of her death of all the video. I found the videos when I moved back of all the things I recorded.
Yeah.
Where she's in her, covered her head in a tent because she's menstruating, doing the biblical womanhood book.
Yeah.
And we're discussing stuff. And I was like, I don't know. It doesn't really work. So that's one reason why I don't trust my judgment. Second one, the last time she was on the podcast was after I thoroughly defeated Greg Boyd in the debate in Minneapolis of process versus open theism. Whoa. Now, it was a thorough defeat because Tony and Rachel were running it, and we used the Oxford style debate, and given the packed, sold out house was most of his church members, they all started as open theists. So it's who changes the most minds. So the fact that I persuaded 10% of the audience to switch teams meant I won, but I'm not. I mean, it's like I'm keeping track of it and reminding Greg Boyd, who, if you hadn't come on this, Bo, I have 6 times that Tony and I bring up Greg Boyd dodging Tony's invitation to discuss demons. on the podcast, where he kept bringing it up, and Greg would always say yes and then never do it until we rented a rooftop in Malibu. And that's when he comes up, and we do this live podcast with Greg Boyd,
Really?
and
NT
Wright, and who wrote Old Scratch? Richard Beck. So
come on.
So this live podcast happens. It like my main youth volunteer, one of my main youth volunteers at church was also like the physical trainer for famous people, and like Tom Petty and stuff, who you know was UCC and things. So they were like, "Oh, we'll let you use the rooftop," and so we do the pot. It's the same one we did where we did the
Yeah. I know
the big cornhole tournament
with Barry and
the first time we did Oh Contreire Monfrere was on that roof.
I know. Malibu. It was in Malibu.
Yeah, when
just
Tony,
up from Pepperdine.
Yeah, when Tony said that Pope Francis will be a failure and not make a big difference.
I thought he was going to be assassinated, actually.
Well, I'm just baiting you. Tony.
Are you trying to make me mad?
Yes,
I don't
that's
feel
what
mad
I'm
enough
doing.
to play Au Contraire. I'm not mad
Can
enough.
I just tell you, this thing happening on the side is like worth its weight in gold. This is worth it.
I'm not even looking at it.
It's so good. My only thing is I wish we could respond to it, because sometimes, like when you two were talking, I could be talking to someone. I'm really enjoying it. Other thing, Rachel, my favorite Rachel memory is when we hosted Big Tent Phoenix.
Oh, yeah.
We set up this amazing thing where people had to be in conversation with each other, right? It wasn't like a regular conference. And Trip, we paired Rachel Held Evans and Marcus Borg.
Oh, I know. Tony and I have some backlash from this experience.
That was one of the most.
Tell the story, Bo, and then we'll see if Tony and I's version, where there's some shrapnel left, matches. So Big Tent Christianity, a grant that Philip Clayton, my dissertation advisor, it was running, and then we did these different Big Tent Christianity events around the area, and it was I heard this later from Rachel. She was like, it was the first time I did an event where I spoke with Nadia.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me if this is true. This is my version of it. There's a version of it in my Jesus book for Fortress that Tony edited. Which I don't know if I edited it to not get in trouble or my memory there is more accurate, but Anthony Smith, who was part of the emergent cohort in Charlotte. He ran the Postmodern Negro blog.
Yeah.
One of the people in the emergent conversation where I thought, well, they might actually be smarter than me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And
so smart. Yeah.
So look, Bo, it's really hard for me to consciously tell myself that person's smart. They might have different focuses over time, but for me to say to myself, no, I don't know if I could have got there. That's a different thing altogether.
Well, we're all differently abled.
Yeah,
and we have different access to education.
Or are you venting from that that qualifying exam experience? Because you know what privilege we both have.
I know
that Tony doesn't.
Whenever Tripp says especially, then I know I'm a little bit smarter than him, and that makes me feel good.
Especially? That's his
when he says especially or something. He just says whenever the North Carolina Public Grammar School comes out, and I'm like, okay, I got a little bit on Tripp.
Wow,
my grammar's better.
Look, I want you to know.
Listen, I was born in rural Ohio, and I learned to talk in Georgia. Sometimes I have things like that come out.
Yeah, well, Tony didn't, and I just want you to know, I imagine him getting more and more excited every time he sent his first edits on my first book. Like he's just like, I can't believe I get to track changes on this. Like he's gonna have to hit accept 50 times in the first 3,000 words. Anyway,
the North Cackalack.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love Khaled.
I do love
By
Khaled.
the way, Khaled, that phone call with you.
Oh, wow.
Began my journey. Thank you, buddy.
Aw.
I mean, Cal and Keith Perry, people, if you have been around not long enough to know Khaled, you should Google. Also, one of the questions was, who is on the most unreleased podcast? Khaled and I have two of them that are in the folder on Dropbox of unreleased. One is clear why it's the case. The other, the event we were talking about and promoting because of COVID canceled, and I couldn't figure out a way to edit it. But during lockdown, we recorded this podcast. It was like so beautiful. Anyway,
are you you gotta close the loop on the big tent story?
Oh yeah. Okay, so right. Anthony Smith, the postmodern Negro blog, blah 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 blah. Asks after this beautiful fun session of Rachel and Marcus interacting, says, well, when the sun expands and subsumes all of Earth, if we have not left Earth as a species, is this kingdom of God still coming? Because, you know, he was doing this realized eschatology thing. And this was Anthony's question, to which Marcus Ward gives. And now I want to just say that I affirm how quality his liberal dodge was. And I've pulled out liberal dodges in all sorts of situations, and his was like Gracie style MMA, like theological dodge. He gives an answer. It's just basically like, no, it's not still coming. But he doesn't say that. He gives this beautiful poetic blah, 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 blah thing, to which then there's just like this pause, and Anthony kind of looks at Rachel Held Evans, and she goes, well, I hope so. To which you hear the room just go, oh, thank you. Right. And underneath it, and I can't remember what I said in the book, but underneath it, I realized that that part of why people ask those kind of questions isn't about themselves. And I think that most progressives think it this way. Like, you want to know if you live or not. You want to know like what's in the future and blah, blah, blah. Yes, our own finitude and things is its own question. But beyond that is, does the word God, when you use it, correlate to something that's depth, has a reality on the other side of our use of the word? Is the grammar of God have traction with something when there is no grammar? And that was the experience in that moment. And I remember after it, Rachel being like, I had no idea what to do. I'm like, everything he said was amazing and great. And I was just like, I don't think so, but I didn't know what to say. And I was like, no, you won the room, just because of how many people want to know, when we use the word God, does it have traction with something when no one knows how to use the word God? And I think if we do the Venn diagram of that, the people anxious about that question, and we have to reframe it. If we get asked the question, who is God? Then we realize that is the God question in that sense, right? Is still a big deal. All the theologians have to reframe the question before they can answer who is God. And all the ones that are uncomfortable saying the kingdom of God is still on the horizon when there's no one that knows the word. Anyway, now, Bo,
hold on real quick. I just want to say how amazing this side chat is. This is the first time I'm doing a venue.
You've already said it, buddy.
I know, but I just want to say that there are people on the other side of the world who are drinking coffee this morning. And we used to say, I don't know if you still say it, but we used to say when I was on the show that that coffee is home brewed.
Yeah, because Tom Ward requested it.
The Nazarene. Okay. The Nazarene.
Before we turn it over to Oh Contreire, I just want to say this. Whoa. A lot of people these days say, Oh, I only listen to the first hour of Joe Rogan because he's so stoned by hours 2 and 3. I can't even listen anymore. And I just want to say, Trip, man, for years, you've been getting better the drunker you've gotten for years.
It's a spiritual gift, Tony.
I would just say Joe Rogan has got nothing on you, buddy.
Well, I will tell you, there's one episode that involved other chemicals that modified me that never made the internet. One of the Instagram questions was how many episodes never showed up whatsoever. Now you're in 3 of them, Tony.
I do.
My absolute favorite that I have.
Your garage was the amount of beer in your Los Angeles.
I was a competitive homebrewing.
It was like more than a human being could manage, and it was a lot of high proof beer too.
Yeah. It didn't help that he lived 2 doors down from. It was Joe, right?
Oh yeah, Joe Borden.
Oh,
he was my homebrew partner when we competed. He was also the head writer for the Tosh.0 show.
I know.
And Alabama PC USA man. And we had ourselves some fun. But we're gonna play this game.
People are calling for Oh Contreire, by the way.
Look, I understand because I want to watch Pau Gasol's Rafter, but I also recorded it, so don't worry.
Okay.
Now, because we're gonna do Au Contraire, and then we're gonna do. We gotta do our toast and things, but there's and I will save all the questions. We have some amazing questions people sent in, but honestly, I don't know. I might have to wait till 21-year anniversary of Homebrewed to get both of you back on again. So I would really just want to hang out with both of you.
Hey, Trip, I don't know if the questions are for Tony as well, but I was just going to say my 50th birthday is next Saturday, and my request from you is to do a Theology Nerd Throwdown. Could we answer some of the questions then?
Oh, yeah. You I think there's probably 20-some questions that got sent out on Instagram, so there will be no shortage of questions.
All right. Sounds good.
Look, if there are people that have been hanging around with Homebrewed forever, then the idea of Tony and Bo talking with Trip was just like catnip. They're like, oh, I'm going to stay up and drink while this happens? Come on. Anyway, all right. So the last thing before Au Contreire Monfrere was I re-listened to them all on the podcast to see where we're at. This is a game. Bo's got to explain it and set it all up because it was his invention, which was literally one of the greatest things that ever happened. Was I bitter that someone invented a theological improv game other than me that I enjoy better than all the ones I came up with? Yes, I was. Have I played it with, like, every time a school, like a div school or seminary has me come and do something like on visitation day or whatever, do I make all their faculty play these games that Bo invented? Yes. And they love it, but
they do.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'll tell you 2 truths about Au Contreire Monfrere.
Okay.
Tony and I are tied at 3-3.
Is that right?
In the last 15 years. And Brian McLaren has never won because he's too nice. Those are the truths of Au Contreire Monfrere. The literally funniest thing I have ever heard on Au Contreire Monfrere. I don't know if you two remember this. At PYM one year, Homebrewed was running a class, the first online version of Atheism for Lent.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm speaking at PYM. So Bo, you and Pete are running at Atheism for Lent on the live stream while Tony and I are doing Au Contreire Monfrere and Johnny Russell and Tim Burnett, and you 3 of this text exchange, and y'all have like created the prompts, right? Well, because you're gonna do the thing during this and you couldn't be there, and I'm like, someone has to run the class, blah blah blah. So I've been listening to this thing, and Johnny Russell, if people listened a while back, he was a guitar player from the Cold War kids who then does like a PhD in theology and then becomes a homeless chaplain because Jesus ruined him. Honestly, I don't have that character. I would have stayed a rock star. But well, it gets to the end, and I hear in the audio of this episode, you hear Tim and Johnny start laughing while they're discussing y'all's text exchange. The question was a question about Mark Driscoll. Yeah. And it was built with pauses because he had gotten in trouble. Surprise, surprise.
As he's prone to do.
Yeah, but y'all had constructed the perfect Oh Contreire Monfrere question. Yeah. Where just the way Johnny paused it, it implied all sorts of things that you may not want to imply about Mark Driscoll. Yeah, and when I re-listened to it, I said to myself, honestly, this is pretty clean compared to what happened. And I was going to play it when I was going to make a montage of things before I lured you on the podcast. So I just want to say the Au Contraire Monfrere, Tony and I are 3-3, and even the episode where Tony and I battled and you weren't present, the episode ends by them reading your question, and we agree that it was funnier than any of our answers from the previous 6 parts of the thing that we forfeited.
Oh my gosh.
So we have a hung tie.
All right, here we go.
Au Contraire Monfrere.
Yep.
Because your texted question from 7 or 8 years ago was so funny that we forfeited. So that's where we stand.
That's amazing. I had totally forgotten about that, but I remember it now that you said it.
Oh, I'm going to send you the link directly to that point in the episode because I laughed so hard the first time I re-listened to it that I had to pause, catch my breath, and then re-listen to it. And then the idea of the text comments between you, Tim Burnett, Way Collective in Santa Barbara, Johnny Russell, now homeless chaplain in San Francisco, former rock star, y'all's conversation of it was my imaginary version of it was so humorous to me that I had to pause, then re-listen. And Tony was like, I forfeit. That was peak funny.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway. All right. As you explain the game, I'm going to open the last can of the Process Party beer from Theology Beer Camp.
Really?
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
All right. You explain Au Contraire Monfrere because there's like 30,000 regulars that don't know.
Okay. So this is a game where I'm going to make a possibly provocative statement, and we're going to take turns. We're going to alternate. And so the first person to go gets to speak in the affirmative or against the provocative statement. And what that does, for 60 seconds, they get to talk. Then the other person is required to say Au Contraire Monfrere and take the opposite view. Okay? So sometimes you're speaking for a view you don't actually hold because you're just via the game, you have to take that position. So because we're out of practice, here's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to have a practice round. It's only 30 seconds, not 60 seconds. It's only 30 seconds. And it will not count unless there's a tie, and it will become the tiebreaker. Understood?
I think so.
I need a confirmation from Tony that he understands this tiebreaker.
I have a terrible connection right now, unfortunately.
Okay.
The internet hates him.
Tony, if you pause your video, it might free up
You guys talk for a minute. I'm gonna come back.
All right, pause your video. You know what's funny, Trip? Pastoring in COVID, you learn all sorts of weird things. Like, for instance, if you pause your video, it frees up bandwidth.
Okay, Tony. Hey, can I tell you something while Tony's gone?
Yeah, let's talk about Tony.
No. This is about you. This is about you. I've re-listened to a lot of the episodes people sent in as their favorite, like TNT episodes.
Okay.
And And someone made a hypothesis that then after listening to the TNT episodes this week, I listen to a lot of podcasts on double speed while I'm doing chores and stuff. Someone said, well, you can always tell if Bo actually likes what you're saying because he's so positive. If before you finish the statement, he goes, "Oh."
I make sounds. Oh wow. Okay.
The other one was
I have mouth
the other one was you did all these Tolkien things after you like Bo wasn't on the podcast, but he has a whole set of tattoos. And y'all had that one Tolkien episode where everyone realized you all loved this maybe as much as Jesus. When I can't remember the guy's name that was on. And he's like, I just want to hear you and Bo read your favorite passages from Lord of the Rings, start crying and talk to each other. And I was like, that's probably going to be like the easiest podcast episode of all time. Because we both like Lord of the Rings so much, it would not be hard to just be like, I'm just going to read a passage from Tolkien and we're going to talk. Yeah. Like I don't even cry that easy for most biblical passages, but you get Sam talking about how we're all tied up in the stories of, if he's like, from the Andalindale on and like Baron and Luthien, and we're in that story too. I'm like, yes, we are friends. Anyway. All right. Tony's back.
Hey, Tony, you're back. How's your connection?
Yeah. I think I'm better.
You think you're better? You look better.
I don't think I need to know anything about a tiebreaker. I'll just follow
okay.
Your lead, Bo.
So thanks. There's a first for everything. So this first is a practice round.
Wait, do we have the magic word for each one? If we say it, we win.
That ahead of time. So there's a magic phrase. All right. So here's the thing.
You don't tell us the word, but I want to know if I'm going to try to guess it.
Yes. So here's the thing. Inside every one of our rounds, there is a magic phrase. And whoever's the first person to say that magic phrase automatically wins the round. If not, it goes to a vote. Okay?
All right.
So, first round is a practice round. It's only 30 seconds, and it doesn't count unless we need a tiebreaker at the end. Everyone clear?
All right.
All right. All right. So, Tony, you're actually this question goes to you first. You get first option on this. So, here is the prompt. Ready? And it's only 30 seconds. Okay. Biscuits are the greatest breakfast food of all time.
Okay. And I can just start on I've got a little clock out here. Biscuits are the greatest breakfast food of all
right. Time. Yeah, because I thought we're so out of practice. We need to practice the actual motion. And then, on a non-theological issue.
I hope they're all non-theological because I'm actually out of practice theologically a little bit.
No,
so this
good.
Is more breakfast food is more up my alley than theology these days.
All right, so this is the practice round. It doesn't count, but it will become the tiebreaker at the end if needed. Okay, biscuits are the greatest breakfast food of all time. Go.
Okay, biscuits are indeed the greatest breakfast food of all time because the fact is it's good for your GI tract to be able to digest a hockey puck. What you want to do is, in order to clean out your intestines thoroughly, you want to have the most compact bowel movements absolutely possible. So when you jam as many biscuits, if you can't swallow hockey pucks, which we do up here in the north, just eat as many Southern biscuits as you can, and you will have concrete poops.
Done. Tony, I have to say that was well played because Trip loves biscuits and you have forced him to take the opposite opinion. Well played, my friend. Well played.
Au contraire, mon frere. Biscuits are not the ultimate breakfast food. It is burritos. Why? Because biscuits come from the South, and you know what they like? The logic of the one. You know what resists the logic of the one, namely carbohydrates and fat stuck in a biscuit? the burrito. Why? Because the burrito cannot exist on its own. No. The burrito invites, it lures a cornucopia of different possibilities into its inside. You could have eggs, bacon, all sorts of different proteins. You could also have a different assortment of vegetables and cheeses and yum and salsas.
See, he always goes over. He always goes over. Always, Bo. Always. He's never not gone over.
An essential part of this game is Tony complaining about time every time.
That's true.
And he really complained when
what's the point of
Johnny
having rules
was there.
if you're not going to enforce them?
The secret phrase, there was 2 for this round. One was Southern fried, and the other was muesli. So
it looks like the first response from Tony in the comments is that Tony won.
Tony won, yeah. I think so. Tony, okay. So Tony gets, I think Tony's going to get the tiebreaker. Trip, there's a lot of pressure on you.
I know. Eager commenters.
You also have home field advantage, so you gotta come through here.
Home stream advantage. Though I have to say that there's quite a form of homebrewed piety just to harass me. But I want you to know the Process Party beer is holding up. All right. I'm ready.
All right, here is the first prompt. So you have 60 seconds to either speak for or against what's being said. And then the other person will be required to take the opposite position with Oh Contreire, my friend. You ready?
Yes.
Trip, this first one is for you. Let me look at the clock. Pope Francis is everything that a progressive Protestant could have hoped for. Go.
Pope Francis is basically everything a progressive Protestant could have hoped for because he's still a Catholic Pope. So we just want to bracket off all the basic things about why Protestants aren't Catholic. There's that. But if you take all the other stuff, a encyclical to critique capitalism and the way it preys upon the fraternity, which is his word, of humanity. Yeah, he's got that. Does he also think the system fractures the flourishing of our ecosystem? Yes. Does he embody the will of the mind of Christ by washing the feet of those condemned in the prisons, by engaging across religious divides, by recognizing the personhood of even same-sex families? Yes.
Done. Tony?
Au contraire, mon frère. Laudate si, laudate no. Pope Francis has not moved the needle of the Catholic Church 1 degree. We all had these high hopes for him that he was going to be the progressive's dream. The fact is, the Roman Catholic Church continues to be a monolithic institution that is deeply homophobic and misogynistic. Nothing about that has changed under his tenure as Pope. And it's pretty clear that he hasn't even set the groundwork for the next Pope to continue any kind of progressive reforms. And almost surely the pendulum is going to swing back to a Ratzinger-esque conservatism following Francis.
Okay. Nice job. You finished in time, too.
Oh.
All right. So no one got our secret phrase, which was trad cath.
I found that that we're in re-listening to all these in the last week.
Yeah.
Bo regularly wins for the reveal of the secret word.
Oh my God.
That was an
the
option
secret words are the best part of this. I'm ready to retire from Au Contraire, except I just want to keep hearing the secret words.
But again, the apart from Pamela, it seems that the chat's very fond of Tony's responses to
I think Tony won that round, Trip.
Oh,
let's go.
He also has the tiebreaker at the end, so you got to come here, man.
What do you mean?
All right,
it's not
Tony,
good?
you ready?
It is good.
Prompt 2, you ready?
Yeah.
The emergent church conversation was a gateway drug that proved the slippery slope critics correct.
Yes, in every way, the emerging church movement proved D.A. Carson right. See, D.A. Carson and all the conservatives at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School in Chicago, they knew what we were up to. And that was we were trying to lure people away from Christianity by making them question the foundational underpinnings of the faith, including were Adam and Eve real historical persons? Did Paul really write Ephesians? And all of the other super, super important things that make people believe in the resurrection. Like, how can you possibly believe in a resurrection if you don't think that Jonah was actually swallowed by a fish and lived in the fish's belly for 3 days? You can't believe them both. So D.A. Carson was right. We were Satan.
Oh my God.
Trip?
Oh Contreire, Monfrere. D.A. Carson is not right, and the emergent church isn't a gateway drug. What it is an attempt to articulate the encounter with the God that was present in Christ, despite the fact that Christianity has been warped by shitty modernitist, see, you can tell I've been drinking now, epistemological concerns. Look, most of the things Tony said are completely related, not to historic Christianity, not to like an affirmation that the new creation has been in breaking in response to the resurrection, none of that kind of stuff. It is a list of weird questions that fundamentalists invented in American Christianity and then proceeded to tell everyone that this is what real Christianity is. Emergent Christianity is actually like one of the points that the rest of evangelicalism could have woke up to the fact that they've been trying to repeat the 17th century at everyone as if it's true. If emergent Christianity had, shit. Look, that's the only time. Look, I ended it at the time just so Tony didn't give me a hard time. But
you know.
Oh, Trip.
You were on a roll, man.
Look, modernitist is a hard thing to say right now.
Yeah, because it's not a word. Modernitist isn't a word. That's why it's hard to say.
I know it, but it appeared as a word in my head.
Oh my gosh.
You know what I mean? Where it shows
what was it? Please tell me the secret phrase was D.A. Carson.
Phrase in that one was evangelical.
I thought that was too obvious.
Oh, I know. Sometimes I go obvious, but since neither of you won,
I'm definitely winning in the chat this time.
Oh,
but it might be a sympathy. It might be a sympathy.
People are being very sympathetic. They're giving you scores for punches landed.
I know, but
and using a bad word. People are being okay. All right.
Look,
I can use bad words. If that's going to win a round, I'm happy to oblige.
No, Tony, you don't want to ruin your internet opinion. You know.
All right, Tony. This next one goes to Trip to start, but I think that you're going to be able. I think you're going to be able to do well on this one. You ready?
Can I just say how much I love the fact that everything about your preface for this statement I love, because
he's pulling for me.
No, I'm not. He's not pulling for it. I just want you to know how much I love both of you. My favorite thing about the podcast is that I become friends with
Here we go.
Happening here.
I become friends with so many people. Like earlier today, the first part of the Homebrewed birthday was this long Q&A with Dom Crossan. And I did this question where I said, people asked all these criticisms of you about X, Y, and Z. And I told him, I was like, I think they're dumb for this. And he said, I've never heard someone say with so much gusto why they're wrong. I've had this criticism forever. And I'm like, yeah, because you believe in the resurrection and you didn't know it. And he was like, that's not how I would have put it. Right. And like friends, I just love talking with friends and being nerdy. Yes, I've crossed the boundary of tipsy.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Tony. I just want you to know I love both Sanders and Tony Jones.
Oh,
this is called a filibuster from a guy who's losing Au Contraire. That's what's happening right now.
I may lose, but my heart has grown 3 sizes today. All right, Bo, go ahead.
So
I'm sorry
will
to
get back
interrupt
to it,
with
but
my
Tony,
affirmation of you.
say,
grown 3 sizes because you're doing kettlebells and you're working on your cardio.
It's true. It's true. I've worked out for an hour 3 times the last 3 weeks.
Let's go, bro.
And I've never done that in my life, unless I was like in rehearsal for musicals. And that was because I was dancing with chicks and singing.
Forge ahead, buddy. Just pretend channel yourself from 10 years ago.
I know. You know what the thing is? So the reason I haven't pressed through is I was trying to take credit for something. And I know this is so, selfish, but I came up with the phrase 2-beer Bardian because when he's had 2, he becomes like he changes. He becomes like this guy who's about the event.
True. Good point.
All right. Sorry. Okay. Trip, you ready for this?
I was born ready.
All right, here it is. Here's your prompt. Speculative metaphysics is a worthwhile language game.
Speculative metaphysics is absolutely not a worthwhile language game, because why would anyone ever want to use the word God, Jesus Christ, Spirit, Church, atonement as anything other than fan fiction for religious communities that are dead ending into the nihilism of scientific reductionism? I could not believe anybody would want to do metaphysics speculatively because of the empirical and power of science. I mean, obviously that science means that there's nothing going on in you that isn't ultimately determined by the quantum physical level. Everything is epiphenomena. You are the fan fiction of DNA, and the fact that you are so naive to think that there's something like really true, beautiful, good, adventurous, and zesty is bullshit.
Tony?
Oh, Contreire, mon frere. Just think, if the language of speculative metaphysics were to go away, think of all of the mainline seminary professors who would be out of work. Think of all the people. I want everybody who's listening or watching this stream or listening to this podcast to think of your favorite mainline seminary professor. That person has built an entire career on the language of speculative metaphysics. They've written journal articles. They publish their dissertation with a university press. They go to faculty meetings and argue about this. They go to the AAR guild meetings and talk in full of standing room only rooms with 3 or 4 other people listening. And they've made an entire career. They're making $60,000 to $62,500 a year as mainline seminary professors in places like Ohio and Indiana. And if there were no language of speculative metaphysics, all of these wonderful, beautiful liberals would be out of work.
Well played, sir. Well played. I did not see
in wonderful places like Ohio and Indiana. Tony, I would vote for you, even though I don't think you really defended that speculative metaphysics is a necessity of the anthropological experience of being addressed by the ultimate, aka through a kind of like atheism, its experience is the address of finitude. But shit, that was so good.
That was impressive.
I just want you to know you're really leaning back into your
asshole self.
No, I don't want to say that because I'm sure you appreciate the fact that in previous episodes, Brian McLaren texted you about your love for me, and now I just
I still love you, even if I'm going to destroy you in this game.
Well, there's no one I would rather be destroyed by.
Those guys in the MMA octagon always hug after one of them breaks the arm and smashes the nose flat of another guy.
Our secret phrase for that round was all theology is practical theology.
Ooh.
Ooh, yeah. So no one got that, and
Does
so
Tony lose a point that he didn't even mention his own discipline?
His own discipline.
Didn't need to.
All right, Tony. Actually, you start this next one. You ready?
Ready.
Theological education is at an all-time low in the U.S.
Theological education is not at an all-time low in the U.S. because here's what happens. As Brian McLaren and Philip Clayton and so many other people we love have said so often, sometimes, as Tony Campolo used to preach, sometimes church growth happens out the back door. Sometimes what we need to do to get to the true zesty theological core of mainline seminary education is to bring it down to just burn away all the chaff, baby. Send it through the refiner's fire. Get away the dross and get down to the pure molten gold, the molten gold of that mainline theological, speculative, metaphysical language where nobody can say anything constructive about God, because that's really what we need. And once we get rid of all the chaff, we'll have the pure truth of theological education, baby.
Done. Trip counter.
Can you repeat the statement? I actually have no memory of exactly what we're discussing right now.
Theological education in the U.S. is at an all-time low,
and I'm supporting that or against it. Okay, au contraire, mon frere. Theological education is not at an all-time low. Do you know that there is a point where the greatest selling theological book was Late Great Planet Earth? I'm just saying.
I already said it's. I already disagreed. You have to agree with the statement.
Oh wait, I'm agreeing with what?
Yeah, that theological education is at an all-time low in the U.S.
Isn't this a default?
I'm saying it is at the all-time low or not?
It is at an all-time low.
It's
the guy who's
obviously
still
at an
trying to get a
all-time low.
job in the Theological Academy.
You have 30 seconds to bail yourself out, Trip. 30 seconds.
Then I'm going to guess what the words are. ATS, accreditation, lack of advancement, student loans, debt,
vice president of development,
administration,
so close,
institutions.
You should stay at this school and get your D-min.
No job security, advancement,
2, 1,
and tribal identity.
Oh, so close. The key, the secret phrase was residential seminary. Oh no, you were so close. Tony's really racking up. You got to come big, man.
Look, the thing is, I'm not even keeping score because I feel like I've already won.
But Trip.
Except that if Tony wins, it does require him to play this game at least 2 more times.
Okay. Next prompt.
Do I get half credit for hinting at the secret phrase?
Maybe.
No, you've told me no every time I've tried this.
No, I'm gonna go with no.
You're against it. Tony is really upset that I would suggest to involve hermeneutical leniency about the secret phrase.
Yeah, there's no room for that. Okay. Next prompt, Trip. Evangelicalism has strayed so far that it's in danger of not being Christianity.
Au contraire, mon frere. I don't even know how to.
The second guy says you don't even.
I know that.
Get to say that.
Why are you ruining my time? I'm going to state the negative to this statement. Evangelicalism has not strayed so far that it's not a part of Christianity, because that's the worst question to ask. I think a lot of people, especially in the progressive situation, have gotten to the point where they're like, do they even count? And insert all the reasons that I've spent years talking about. But if we make a ongoing debate about boundaries, then we miss the point of Christianity. Christianity is not a point about boundaries. It's about the passion or vibrant expression at the center. And if we want to then engage on the left, when the right has embarrassed themselves for a lot of reasons that I won't spend a lot of time talking about, then we miss the invitation if we all stay in the same conversation. So given right now, in the past week, I've had emails from 4 different megachurch preachers who want to know what the hell's going on. And I would rather respond with invitations rather than saying you're not a part of the conversation.
Oh, interesting. Oh, he tucked that in at the end. Tony, evangelicalism. There you go.
Oh Contreire, for evangelicalism has strayed so far from the gospel that it can no longer be considered Christianity. The Gospel Coalition, the Keller Center for Evangelicalism, Christianity Today, Wheaton College, the sex act between a husband and a wife is reminiscent of Christ thrusting his love into the world through the very manly church. Mark Driscoll, Saddleback, female pastors.
Saddleback has gotten a worse name over time.
Oh
no. Willow Creek, women pastors.
Are you just guessing keywords?
Bible Church, Texas.
All right, let's go. 5,
Southern Baptist Convention,
4,
Al Mohler, D.A. Carson,
1.
Trinity Evangelical Divinity School.
Done.
Beth Moore.
That was an interesting strategy. I've never seen that before of just guessing.
It's just word soup, baby. It's word soup.
All right.
Not only will I win the round, I have a much better chance of getting the secret phrase.
I hate to reward you for this, but the secret phrase was Saddleback.
What?
Oh, come on, baby. Are you kidding me?
Oh my God.
Has anyone ever gotten it?
It's not going well.
In seven games of Oh Contreire, has anyone ever gotten the secret phrase?
It's amazing. I didn't see that coming. And only because you dedicated yourself to it.
Oh yeah. I just word vomit. I figure
I don't even know what to do with the fact.
I know that all the listeners, all those words that all those phrases and words and names that I listed, they're just triggering everybody. So they're gonna vote for me because they're gonna be triggered by something that I said in evangelicalism.
All right.
Oh.
Trip, I don't even think you can win at this point, but you can.
Happy birthday.
But you can
not be thoroughly embarrassed.
Yeah, you can gain your dignity. Okay, you ready?
Hold on.
No, wait.
Hold on.
That last question go to you?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
oh,
my turn.
Oh no, Tony. This last prompt's for you. I think this is gonna be like in the fourth quarter of a sports ball game.
Oh,
yeah, I'm afraid.
I'm already up by 60 points.
I'm afraid of this one.
What score are we working at right now?
I think Tony's up 5-1.
Wow. Look,
it's not good.
It's not good.
So I might just take a knee. Let's just see what happens.
No. I feel like it's the 15th birthday of Homebrewed.
I want Trip to redeem himself a little bit.
Obviously the last question's worth 15 points.
No, I don't want to run up the score. I'm not one of those guys. I'm not trying to make it to the big dance by running up the score.
Tony, I appreciate that you, as you have matured, have moved into more of an ironic and generous space.
It's me.
But I don't think you're going to be able to do it on this one. I don't think you're going to take a knee.
Okay.
You ready?
Do I get to go first then?
No. This is Tony's prompt.
Well, no. He's so far behind, You
want me to reverse it?
Bo.
Wait, do you want me to reverse it?
No, you're the ref. Bo. Come on, buddy.
All right, Tony, here we go. You ready? Last prompt. Atonement theology continues to be the clearest litmus test of orthodoxy.
I just so want to take a knee because Trip, you're going to be able to go off on this one, and I'm just going to burn a few of my seconds here by just rambling at the beginning. But I'll just say that I'm going to help you out, Trip, by saying atonement theology is the best litmus test for Christianity, for orthodoxy, and here's why.
Yeah.
Because if you want to know whether you're an Orthodox Christian, there's a particular book you can buy. It has a red cover on it, and there's a cross with a necklace, and it's called Did God Kill Jesus? Searching for Love in History's Most Famous Execution. And if only you were to read that book and to get to page 230, you would find the perfect quintessence of an answer of the Orthodox version of Christianity and Orthodoxy, and that would be your litmus test. You're welcome, Trip.
All right, Trip.
So I'm thanking you for the fact that you plugged your own book.
No, you're thanking me because I'm allowing you to take the position that the atonement is not the litmus test for orthodoxy.
Okay, well, how about, actually, I was going to enjoy to take the other opinion, but it's obviously the atonement theory is not the test for orthodoxy, but that God did something in Jesus we couldn't do for ourselves is. There was a story at the very beginning of this podcast where a whole bunch of Christian theologians that teach at all the big schools dodged, and the question they dodged more than who is God is what did God do in Christ we couldn't do for ourselves, and they all dodge it. The confessional tradition says it worked, right? If you look at the creeds and stuff, that forgiveness worked, but no one explains it. So the churches had this series of different atonement theories. But when you get to the point where you aren't even sure how to even articulate it, that's nuts. It obviously is a big deal, but it's not the particular explanation that's final. It's that part of being the body of Christ, part of being the life of the church, is one that's experience of God is not mediated by nothing, but it's mediated by Jesus. And I think that is essential and includes a whole host of different expressions.
Wow. That was beautiful, but unfortunately,
I felt unfortunate.
Another point.
Our secret phrase was shibboleth.
Ah!
or I would have also accepted.
I was thinking about saying the penal shibboleth, but I didn't say it.
I would have also accepted master signifier. Either one of those would have, either one of those would have kind of.
Hey, Bo, do you remember that
does this count? I don't know. Can you see this? I used the word shibboleth in a text message today.
No, you did not.
I did.
Scoot it.
No, we can't read it, but we trust you.
I used the word shibboleth in a text message.
That's
today,
amazing. So, unfortunately,
do you remember that time we had at David Fitch on the podcast?
I do. I love David Fitch,
and he was like real insistent about like the few master signifiers he thought were essential. In discussing the end of evangelicalism. And then the moment I brought up other topics that I thought equally qualified, it looked like
hadn't thought of.
Well, it looked like the guy that's like allergic to cats that discovers the person sitting next to him on the plane has a cat allergy, but they have like a comfort cat with a license. It was one of those moments after it. I was like, why are we having this guy? Like he comes up with like weird ways of like supporting like heteronormativity for awkward ways. And you were like, no, we'll talk about his book. And then when he gets on, he just like gets these weird vibes. I was like, well, what about this master signifier? And when it got to the atonement one, homeboy got weird. I don't know how you edited that podcast.
Trip, I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but there are different kinds of insightful, right? There are different kinds of genius. So that guy he really is. He's amazingly insightful and sort of a genius. But the genius that you write about something 6 months, a year, 2 years ahead of time, your genius is in the moment, right? Improv. And so you were coming up with master signifiers IRL in real time, and it was like I haven't thought about that before, right? Two different kinds of insight. Well,
I support your affirmation there, Bo. Okay, so all right. Well, I have one last question for you. Both have to answer it.
All right, but Okay, you go and then I'll go.
No, you say whatever you want.
Bo's got to crown a winner, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
my bad. I was minimizing that because of my defeat.
I was going to say, I think Trip is distracting from the fact that Tony ran the circuit there. That is a clear winner. Tony Jones, Oh Contreire Monfrere, the Contrarian, holds his crown. Well done, sir.
I really feel like Brian McLaren would be like, I'm glad your asshole came back out.
And Tony, let's be honest, you did that not through being a jerk.
No,
you did it through gameplay. You played.
I'm smarter than Trip.
Yeah,
I'm smarter than Trip. Clearly, that should be clear to everybody.
I actually knew we were in trouble from the first moment when you spoke in favor of biscuits. I knew we were in trouble.
I was worried. That was the moment I decided I shouldn't have pre-gamed for this.
Yeah. Because if you had taken non-biscuits and you left Trip biscuits, we would have. I mean, this thing would have gone differently.
You would have gone a whole different way.
Right?
Trip, don't blame it on the beer because Trip, you cannot blame it on the beer because
no, it was a 3 shot tequila with a splash.
I'm drinking 108 proof whiskey.
Oh gosh!
No. But Tony, I had what's called the Worthy Splash. James Worthy. He retweeted this. It's 3 shots. It's 3 shots of tequila and a shot of pineapple juice. It's called the Worthy Splash.
No, that's unholy.
This is like actually.
Hey, Bo. Yeah? I'm so glad you came out of retirement because it's a fun game and you're the genius behind it. And every time I go into the game, I think this is gonna suck because Trip's a way better theologian than I am, and he's quicker on his feet than I am.
Yeah.
But somehow, when the whiskeys and the beer are flowing, I guess I got a chance. I got a chance. Yeah. So
they call it a puncher's
I'll keep playing I'll keep playing as long as you keep reffing. And I mean, the fact that do I get an extra point? Is that if you get the secret word, do you get an extra point?
I guess you get to.
It's never been determined because no one's ever gotten it before.
It's true, no one's gotten it.
I guess you get extra frosting on your cupcake or something. I don't know. We've never crossed this bridge before.
Well, it's been fun. I'm semi-retired.
Dean wants to know why Oh Contreire Monfrere is not a monthly event. Here's the thing: is I'm comfortable with being a monthly event until I'm ahead of Tony in the win column. And then we could retire it for periods.
I see. Okay.
As long as I stay ahead.
So are you
now,
saying
if you got
it's
ahead,
now 4-3? It's 4-3.
That is the current score after 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm 4-3. Now I want to, my winning percentage when playing other people is very high, but against you is not very good. Like, did I beat Brian McLaren twice? Yes. Did I beat Diana Butler Bass? Yes. Did Rob Bell abort the whole game before it started? Yes. Did Rob Bell, this is one of the questions on Instagram, asked me not to post the video of our competitive preach-off at Monkish Brewing Company? Yes, because he lost miserably. But, there are a lot of theological improv games, Tony, that I've played with lots of different people. And the fact that I wasn't winning in this after scrolling through it made me really want to have Bo back on to play this game, and now I'm behind.
So just to put a cap on this, I think it's always good to celebrate the secret phrases by reading them back to back and just marinating. In their
this is quality.
Ready? Here we go. Trad Cath, Evangelical, All Theology is Practical Theology, Residential Seminary, Saddleback, and Shibboleth.
It's like everything that's wrong with the world except for that last one.
Oh no.
Bo, that is awesome, dude. That is awesome.
Glad you.
I can't believe I got Saddleback.
But in fairness, though, you were only guessing secret phrases.
I was just throwing out evangelical words.
Yeah. That was interesting. I've never seen that tactic before.
Okay. So two things before we wrap up. One, and this was in the IG things, was at some point on the podcast, I'd made a comment. You remember, Bo, when we did that Revelation of Darkness thing at Monkish Brewing Company with Rob and Pete and Barry and stuff? And
by the way, the best moment of my life and the worst moment of my life on that same day.
Well, I really feel like that's an invitation to a conversation, not when recording. But my favorite thing about that was, we had been doing these live podcasts for a while, right? Yeah. And so when Rob got to Los Angeles, when he left his church or whatnot, Loveland comes out and we go and meet him, right? Like right after he got there when he was doing whatnot.
Yeah, he was doing that ABC show with who's the guy who the Lost guy,
Cameron Carter something.
No.
Lost guy.
Carlton something.
Yeah. Carlton. And he was putting on this variety show downtown LA, and I went to it the first night, and then I got to meet him afterwards, and he said, "I love Homebrewed. I love you guys." So then I called you, and then you came down, and we spent time with him the second night.
Yeah, and so Carlton Cruz, there we go.
Yeah.
So we go do this thing, and then he sends me this email, and he's like, when he was working on
the
not
Rob Bell show,
Carlton Banks.
Carlton Banks. No, it's not that cool. But what we talk about when we talk about God Book. And we were discussing this email about all the science stuff related to it or whatever. And he's like, oh, yeah, this is very helpful, blah, blah, blah. I don't think he anticipated that I responded to the text like it was a peer-reviewed article, with like comments and whatever. Oh, it's very helpful. Like, well, let's do something. So then it turns into, we'll do a podcast. Then, we're going to do it live because he wanted to do what Pete did. Now, did Peter Rollins tell him that the last time he did a live homebrewed podcast with us that he and Kessler Bruin were in pirates outfits? No. Did he?
Didn't you hire a magician at that show too?
No, this has all happened. See, here's the thing: is that Pete's poor description of what happened at a live homebrewed podcast at breweries led Rob to want to come. And then what happened. There are like food trucks or the brewery. And because there's only so many seats, like it all sells out before many people that were Rob Bell fans got tickets. So, he's trying to win the room or whatever. So after it, we're sitting there and he's like, I'm hijacking the podcast and going to talk to you. He doesn't play any of the games or whatnot. And the video, by the way, is hilarious, which at some point maybe I'll talk him into releasing, because there's a camera that's up on his face while I'm doing drunk trip, doing crazy things, and we have to do a preach-off where the band starts playing and they play No Woman, No Cry. And I proceed to do a Easter sermon based on 1 Corinthians 15. To the melody of No Woman, No Cry. And I think this is fun. And Rob's like, I'm done. Like, this is great or whatever. So after he's like, whatnot. And you and I are talking to him or whatever. And my buddy Joe, who you mentioned earlier, who is my homebrew partner, and his buddies that wrote for the Tosh.0 show come up.
Yeah.
None of the others are religious whatsoever. One's Jewish.
No.
And and they're like trying to be nice to tell me bye, right? And he says, one of his buddies is talking to me. He's like, feels weird. He's like, hey, Rob, like, did I get your name right? He's like, you're really charismatic. Have you considered preaching? I think you would do a great job.
Oh my gosh.
To which Rob's like, really? I've heard that before.
That's amazing.
Thanks for coming. And that was one of the funniest moments because I have never seen I've never actually successfully held in a laugh because I knew it'd be bad for my own well-being.
Yeah.
And you do this number, Bo. This is what you do. And you just walk off. And now I'm stuck there as my friends walk away. You've left like following Joe to say something. And Rob's looking at me like, oh, Junk.
Yeah.
You know, like they didn't know who the hell I was. And he's like, because he was like, you know, I'm kind of like a secular Jew or whatever and not religious. But if I was going to go to a church, like, I feel like you're pretty good at preaching.
That's amazing. You know, my favorite night from that evening, well, I don't expect that anyone else even remembers it happened. I only remember it because I've been a church planter in the past, and I was in conversation with Pete Rollins, and I was saying something about like church planting or starting new churches, and he got so upset. He was like bent out of shape, and he's like, you know, I've started 2 new churches and no one ever gives me credit for it. And it was the first time I had ever heard Pete Rollins speak in the positive, like in the constructive voice about his ministry. And I know no one remembers it, but in my mind, it was the funniest thing is that Pete got bent out of shape because he doesn't get credit for helping to start 2 fresh expressions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Tony, what is your favorite homebrewed Pete Rollins story? Because if I hadn't lured Bo on here, I have a whole set of audio clips of the 3 of us talking that I was going to use to basically harass him because I knew he'd be asleep right now in Ireland.
Is he in Ireland?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I have some specific memories, but they're kind of fuzzy. I think, Bo, I mean, it's so funny to hear you say that. I bet Pete would be so embarrassed that he spoke positively about even his own church planting. Now he would deny that. Yeah. I mean, it's funny to hear Pete talk, you know, the book of his that turned us all on our ears, How Not to Talk About God. You know, now he's just like, I hate that book. I never should have written that book.
Is that
my God. Pamela literally just won the comment, the chat comment of the day. What I don't love about Pete.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's amazing.
No, you'll have to Pete in the early days of Homebrewed, for those of you who are newer listeners, he was on a ton, same as me. Like we were regular guests for you guys. Yeah. And Pete did you guys had some great conversations for sure.
Oh, yeah. You know, whenever I'm preaching, because I get to preach every Sunday, and which I think is such an honor, but I can't tell you like how many times I either reference Pete or quote Pete, you know, to give him credit. Like his stuff is so, if you're in a post sort of evangelical setting, his stuff is so good. It's unbelievably rich.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. My favorite thing about Pete is how wrong he is consistently, and I get to argue with him about it. And there's no person I've lived with until Elgin got to 15 that I knew was wrong as much as Pete. You know, and Elgin's my own child. Anyway, okay, so I had so much fun doing this. I am about to drink more, and I know I shouldn't be on the internet when I do this, but I'm thoroughly thrilled with the fact that we're going to have your birthday party on the internet, Bo. Tony, I want you to know that both of you are really deep friends, but we're going to do our toast.
Okay.
And
I have a Belgian triple.
I know. Nice. Tony wants to do a toast.
Okay.
So we'll each get to do a toast, and then we're going to go. Oh, fuck. I thought I had one more beer in my bag.
Oh.
So what I'm going to do is go
toast with an empty bottle, bro.
No. I'm gonna go grab one while you two prepare things. That's what I'm gonna do. Because otherwise I'm gonna use bourbon. Tony, you are just inviting people into the opportunity to experience all the things that are edited out of Homebrewed Christianity podcast.
These are the memories I have. These right now are the memories I have.
No. So here's what's going to happen. I am going to go grab a beer.
Just go get your beer. Go get your beer.
No, but I want you both to tell the story you hope I don't edit out of this podcast to everyone on the live stream. There are 287 people still on this live stream.
Oh, and you poor gluttons for punishment.
No. I'm just telling you, I'm going to go get another drink while you two talk. All right.
Here's how you know Tripp's been drinking when he says, no.
Tony, you know him so well. You've learned all of his tells.
Oh my gosh. I will just say, after one of the PYMs in Chicago.
Yeah.
I think it was one you weren't at. Did you go to Progressive Youth Ministry?
No, that's when my mom was ill.
You just edited them afterwards.
Yes.
Okay. Well, there was one where Tripp was so hammered.
Yep.
And he had to get on a plane to go.
Oh no.
To go interview at a church in like Kansas City the next morning.
Oh no.
And I was like, I don't think they're going to let you on the plane, bro. And because he slept in my room, because of course he didn't have a room, he came to
yeah.
Oh, Tripp. So somehow I got him out the door and into a cab, and then that's the last I don't know if he got the job offer or not, but he went and interviewed, and it couldn't have gone well.
Well,
but we had a lot of good times. Yeah, I mean, I also remember Big Tent Christianity in North Carolina, sitting outside, smoking a pipe. With a bunch of people at that conference. Yeah, just some great memories. Yeah.
Wow. It's really been an amazing journey. 15 years. Think about that. Just all of the episodes, the conversations, the interviews, right? Just the engagements, it's amazing to think about. But for one person to be that focused and deliberate and consistent and committed to enhancing the theological conversation, hosting space, interviewing thinkers who otherwise no one would ever know about, right? Like there's people who live in lost in obscurity. And to highlight their voices and to share that platform.
No, you're right, Bo. And how many people, I mean, shit, I've, hosted 3 or 4 different podcasts. How many of us have started podcasts and they never really got off the ground, or they didn't have the buzz, or they didn't blow up like we wanted them to blow up. And so we just kind of quit doing them. And he's just been stalwart. Even when he was in Scotland, he just was stalwart about continuing to just pound them out, have conversations with people, make time in his life to do it, even when it was making him no money, costing him money. He just kept at it. So it's you're exactly right.
Tripp?
Yeah.
Let's toast Tripp.
Well, I think Tripp should be the final toast. I hope we should toast Chad.
Yeah.
Tripp, maybe you were planning to do that.
Okay. So for those that don't know, Homebrewed Christianity started when I was in divinity school with my best friend Chad Crawford, the Crawdaddy, who was the one once Bo helped start editing podcasts, deemed him the Bo Daddy. And Chad had adult onset paranoid schizophrenia disorder and a number of other psychological issues that led to a cycle of treatment and struggle that ultimately led to his death.
Yeah.
When Alicia and I got married, Chad Crawford was our closest friend. He lived with us between semesters in divinity school. He was one of the few people I thought might be smarter than me. He taught himself Akkadian, and I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing the language right, but it's like, if you know Aramaic and Hebrew and that's in your pocket, you learn this one, because the tribal deity storm god also has things in Akkadian, and you want to develop how certain psalms develop. Anyway, Chad was that person, but he was also the first person that had it. He had personal relationships with trees. He was a Austin hippie Baptist.
Wow.
He was also like in student government at Wake Forest, the person that listened to the complainers with a deep type of solidarity that made me uncomfortable and then forced the student government to do other things. So when we started the podcast, it started because he knew I had a pub group where I made rewritable CDs of me interviewing the authors of books, and said, there's a thing called a podcast. You can put it on the internet. So the podcast comes out of our friendship, and it was part of it all the way till, Bo became a part editing. Then he started getting on the microphone. And then there's a situation where we were both in San Francisco while he's struggling with his mental illness. And it was there where we had this beautiful moment one night, and then the next night it takes over, and Bo is wonderfully pastoral, and has the whole time always honored, despite the difficulties dealing with Chad for years, his contribution and what he made present, because he was the one that thought the whole thing was possible. Mm-hmm. He worked for Interfaith Power and Light, and from the very beginning, Homebrewed has cared about faith and environmentalism and ecology and economic stuff before I cared about it. Chad did, and he was the one that pressured me and take this seriously, ask these questions. But the thing Chad taught me most importantly, he was the first adult after Alicia and I, my wife now for 20 years, got married, that was a deep friend to both of us. And he was that person who made me realize the greatest gift you get as an adult is a friend. His friendship with me and Alicia made us both realize how much friendship with each other mattered, but also with others. And because of weird circumstances and awkward asks, that he ended up living with us one summer, and then the podcast comes out of it, we discovered how much there's a challenge as adults to have friends, and how friends are a gift. And I'll send this link to this whole thing, and maybe his mom and dad will skip through most of it. But the thing I hope they hear is that Chad Crawford was the person. I'll put it in the language of Middle Earth. Chad Crawford was Samwise Gamgee to me. Yeah. He was a person who cared about me and saw things in me I didn't think was possible. And because we were friends, I named things in him that he didn't see. And one of the beautiful parts of Lord of the Rings, a text that is as close to sacred as it gets, for me, their friendship, Sam and Frodo's, is one where, because the friend speaks truths into each other, they ultimately internalize them, and a whole new level of reality comes into being. you heard it just in Tony and Bo playing off of, oh, what was the change in Homebrewed when Bo was like, oh, what about this? What if we do this? TNT emerges, and oh, Trip gets his own voice and all that kind of stuff. And plenty of people that never met Bo don't know that ever happened, right? They just assume it's normal. A Homebrewed episode's technically an interview, but Trip talks more. That wouldn't have existed if Bo hadn't said, no, like, you know, you have your own voice and such. And then there are these beautiful episodes of us and our friendship. And none of it would have been possible if Chad hadn't listened to the weird rewritable CDs of me interviewing people from my pub group and said, other people could have this. And so I say all that just to go, when I think of 15 years, and I think the first 5 or 6 years, we spent time hoping we got to 1,000 downloads for an episode. And if no one listens to more than 10 minutes of this episode, it will get 60,000 easy. Wow. Like, so much of that is because Chad said, dude, no one, like, he's like, I remember one time he told Alicia and I, we were talking about, oh, why do y'all keep doing this? Blah, 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 blah. And we're sitting there and he's like, no, you don't understand. A lot of people have questions, but no one knows how to ask it to the smartest people. Mm-hmm. And Trip actually reads their books and cares, and somehow reads large amounts of books regularly from large places. And the thing people could love about Trip is that he cares enough to figure out how to ask the best questions. And I remember him having that conversation when we were smoking a cigar on a porch at the beach on a family vacation where Chad came because he lived with us in the summer, and going like, okay, well, I guess the podcast isn't a waste of time. And then earlier today, there were like 1,400 people on a live stream with me and Dom Crossan, episode 6 or whatever.
What?
And we are literally answering questions about the historical Jesus and how you think about it theologically. Right? He's been on the podcast tons of times since then, but there's nothing in me that made me say, you have the gift of figuring out how to ask questions as a nerd and as someone with your life experience that people would care if there wasn't Chad Crawford. Both of you picked up that echo of him going like, your curiosity matters to the church. You did. Phyllis Tickle did. I remember Tony had sent her something I did, to which then she sent me an email and was like, would you come be a generic responder to something I'm doing in the mountains? Like Diana Butler Bass responded in similar ways, and Brian McLaren did, and all these people did. But so much of it started with Chad saying that. Then it connects with people. Tony kept encouraging me, and all that to say, Chad is one of my best friends, and I don't know. He was the first person I experienced. He's the first friend I had where I've had to experience what it's like where you don't know how to know yourself without them. Whether or not they're to talk to you. And I know there are plenty of people older than me that's had this experience before. But he's the person every year on the anniversary where I did his funeral, or the anniversary of this podcast, where I can't tell my story in a truthful way without him. And both of you fit in that same category.
Wow.
And plenty of other people connected to Homebrew that are there. But Chad was insistent from the very front that there are so many people who have no community, but really legitimate questions about their faith. Mm-hmm. That if we didn't share our own questing, then we're failing as ministers, both of us Baptist ministers of the gospel, not to broadcast it. And then he sent me a podcast of Kevin Smith and said, he did it, and I know he's your favorite director. And so y'all can toast whatever, but Chad motherfucking Crawford has been a longtime best friend, and he's the only person that's passed that's not my family where I don't know how to tell my story without him. I re-listened to the last voice message you sent me. Every couple months, I have pictures of him showing up when my first child was born at 3 a.m. And there are tons of personal things, but he also was the first one to say, you have a weird gift in all your weirdness. This could bless other people. And the second person that did that was Tony Jones, who, when I called him after he'd been on the podcast a couple of times and I was thinking about doing a PhD, gave me weird advice and such. And then it was Phyllis Tickle, who, if we had done the moment montage before you decide to come on, Bo, would have been there. And I just want to give a big endorsement for friends. Chad, because of all sorts of genetic things and life things, had a psychological situation that got worse over time. So for any of your friends that may be struggling, reach out, affirm them, encourage them. And even if they're not, letting a person know that they bear the category friend and that affirmation is something that resonates deeply with the God revealed in Christ and the one Jesus called Abba is a blessing. And I just think of how many times I was one sentence short of telling Chad the kind of blessing he met. He bore to me. And so for you, Bo, and for you, Tony, I want you both to know that if I went through my top 10 and least favorite 10 moments with both of you, which I'm sure neither one of you would want to have the second half discussed on the internet, it would all end with me saying, I don't know who I am without being your friends. And I absolutely love the fact that other people get let in on our friendship. And the main thing I hope they get isn't like, oh, that's cool, they're friends. I hope it mostly makes them think, oh, is it too late to text this person to let them know I care? Yeah. Because Eberhard Jungel said that the crescendo of the New Testament, Eberhard Jungel, great 20th century German theologian, said the crescendo of the New Testament is when in 1 John you get God as love. And I did this talk on it, and one of his students, Ingolf Dalfert, who was one of my professors, I did this rant that was clearly prepared like a preacher. And he said, well, what would you say is the crescendo of the New Testament? And I said, I think that's second. Because the crescendo of the New Testament is Jesus saying, I no longer call you servants, but I call you friends. Yeah. And if there's anything that's worthy of bearing, the notion or weight of God is friendship. And if we want to muster out the depth dimension of reality, if language could capture any of it, friendship is at the beginning. And that, at least one telling of the gospel, is one where the source of all things claims solidarity with all things in its suffering and pain. and struggle, but also in its joy, and says, we are friends. Like, that is what I feel echoed in that confession. We're about 4 weeks from saying he is risen indeed. It's that the unconditioned has claimed conditioned reality, even mine, as friend. That is beautiful. And the first person to sit with me past my intellectual bullshit, force me to say my own brokenness, and then say, you're still lovely, was Chad Crawford.
Wow.
And so I want to give a toast to Chad.
We don't need any more toast than that, Trip. That's the toast. Amen. Thanks, buddy, for sharing that.
Subtle subtoast. All friendship is practical friendship.
Love it. Love it.
It has been an honor to spend this evening with you. I love you both. Thanks for being a part of my journey. And I look forward to the next 15 years of Homebrewed.
Well, I'm having a lot of other options at this point, so.
And I thank everybody who's stuck with us for all this time. And I mean, tonight, not just for 15 years, but tonight. Yeah. And let's just say, Trip, I mean, you got classes coming up. You and I might have one coming up here before Holy Week with my buddy, the rabbi, on how to get the anti-Semitism out of your Holy Week.
Oh, yeah.
And you've got VBS with Bible for Normal People in the summer, and you and I've talked about a God conference coming up in February maybe, and you're working on a book and a lot of good stuff coming down the pike.
Oh, there's tons coming down the pike. But how far? Okay, so yes, the week before Holy Week, we are going to do a kind of like 1 day super nerd out on how to not be anti-Semitic in Holy Week, which if you're a Gentile, you're more than encouraged to show up, because it is collateral damage on a regular basis. At the end of March, I'm doing a webinar with Ilya Dilio. That's on the horizon. All my friends at the Bible for Normal People, we're doing Theology for Normal People, which I just want you to know, it's going to be fun. But also, what Pete and Jared think we should do with theologians, if you want normal people to understand it, is a bit oppressive. If you like using all the words you went in debt for. So it might be more clear than normal if you follow along. But yeah, I love doing all the stuff I'm doing. And so often I show up at places and don't get to tell the stories of all the people that have encouraged and supported and been a part of this. Be it Chad or Bo, and then Nathan, Nick, who's helping a lot behind the scenes now, or like people like Tony and Brian and Diana. And like, there's so many people that have been supportive and stuff that I don't get to name them. This has been a blast. Even in the chat, like when you think of like, oh, Khaled and Christina showing up. We got like Matt Baker, who's done tons of like graphics from it. Jesse Turry has shown up in the chat. There's like so many people that have been a part of tonight, that's been a part of this long journey. I think we are like 100 and some thousand from 20 million downloads total over the life of the podcast, which, considering the first 10 years, if you got over 1,000 downloads, was crazy. It goes up exponentially. The first big jump was literally when Bo convinced me TNT was a good idea. And then like when COVID was like Everyone learned to use Zoom was another explosion. So, and then when Donald Trump was like, and by the way, all you that haven't left evangelicalism, let me give you a MAGA set of religions, was a whole nother explosion. So it's been a wild journey, but friendship's been my favorite part. And I'm looking forward to celebrating your birthday, Bo, at the next time we get to do TNT.
I agree. I'm looking forward to it, man. 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks.
Tony?
Yes, sir.
I've never felt more loved in being dominated in a game.
Love it.
Tony, you have to feel pretty good about that win. That was a dominant.
I feel really good. No, I'm going to sleep well tonight.
Okay.
That and the whiskey is going to help me sleep well tonight.
All right. I am going to sign off. Cheers to you all. 15 more years.
Smoochy boochies, friends.
Same. Cheers. Smoochy boochies. Good night, everybody.